Since the Alapin variation has been one of the most common and yet unpleasant and disliked variations by black when he goes Sicilian, I like to mention that there are ways on how we can handle with that without having to enter all these double-edged, complicated variations that make it so difficult for us to play well. So I'm going to bring a few of these ideas in mind right now so that you know exactly what to look for when you play that opening. First of all, we're going to begin with the line which I call the French approach, against the Alapin. The French approach against the Alpin is extremely interesting because it definitely doesn't get black to go on into anything complicated, and yet it keeps him straight with his pieces, the control that he has, and the flexibility he may get as well. After the move of pawn to e6 at this point, essentially what's taking place is that white usually goes on for something like d4. Now, knight f3 is also a possibility. That stands fine. Although I have to say that it doesn't look anyhow too special. For instance, after the move like knight to the f3, there's going to be the continuation or the position of the possibility for d5, and after e takes to the d, then we realize that all that black has to do really is going to be to make the move of e takes to the d. d4, knight c6, bishop e3, c takes d. And yes, black does have a bit of an isolated pawn out there. I'm not going to say that this is not true because that would be wrong to say. But the good news is that despite the fact that he has that kind of pawn to worry about, it's well defended. I don't believe that white has any easy or quick ways to gather his pieces and attack against it out there. And most importantly, what we get to realize is that you see, first and foremost, the black development and quick piece activity he's going to get is essential. So after bishop d6, bishop e2, knight g7, I'm going to recommend you that you have a very solid position, and now you can concentrate on playing knight takes d4, maybe bishop takes d4, knight f5 with no problems or trouble at all. If you like, you can even do knight f5 immediately, or just rook e8, knight f3, knight f5, bishop knight takes f, bishop takes f5. You can't take the pawn because of bishop takes h2, and the more he tries, I believe the more useful your position is going to stand. Knight g5, queen f6. Do you get an advantage with it? Definitely not. Of course, this is black is long shot from being able to get through and take any advantage. Nevertheless, the important thing is that after after we go on with the move like queen f6, the control is already managed, and with next moves like rook a to the d8 and a few others, I believe it will be just a while before the balance is completely restored and black achieves victory from the opening, and of course that's excellent. So from this point of perspective, after d5, e takes to the d, e takes to the d, bishop to the e3, that is what happened. What went on next is the fact that okay, so it happened a bit differently. Let's take a look. There's a move of queen to b6, d takes to the c, queen takes to b2, queen b3, queen takes a1. It's interesting and amazing that white has different options which are not that good at all. For example, if white doesn't go with bishop e3, he may go on for a move like knight f3. Now, after e takes to the d, takes the knight f3 definitely transposes into Tarrasch variation. I don't know if you are aware of that, but I personally don't believe that there's so many things that black should experience as a problem with this. For example, after knight f3, usually the right idea is that he plays knight to c6 in this position. And okay, so after he goes on with knight to the c6, the next thing is going to be bishop to b5, bishop to the d6, d takes the c5, bishop takes c5, short castles, knight g7, knight d2, castles short. And very similar to the previous variation, I feel like as soon as the black bishop returns, rook e1 and then bishop g4, everything is really pretty well set. You can exchange the bishops if you want, you can play knight f5, and okay, rook e1, queen b6, things are good. That pawn, you may even give it away, because you just get a very stable position after the stable counterplay with this move, and then the white bishop is hanging, as a matter of fact, so he's got a little problem. Of course, I mean, I don't know, this is just one idea, but of course you don't have to do it this way. You can play a6. This is just a different opening, and people who play the Alapin, they may not be ready for that. Okay, but that would be definitely safer. Why do you have to give it away, that pawn? You don't have to risk or put yourself in any risks. Make sure that your queen goes down to the d6. You'll be in a very solid position to play a poor move of rook a to the rook a to the d8. You're getting a strong setup, pretty good development, and everything works fine. It's perfect. So from this point of view, you just want to know how everything is in good condition, and you just have the right game going on. So going back to the previous stage, of course white can try to play bishop e3 and try to be tricky in order to attack or do something, but I don't honestly believe that he can get so much with this. Why? Because after bishop to the e3, essentially you can play with the move of queen to b6 perhaps. In fact, that's quite interesting. And what you see is that we go for the initiative. Like, definitely goes for it. Now, definitely c6 to the d also works nicely because of knight c6, bishop a6, and that's also a very favorite line. I mean, black gets the bishop pair in a strong position, so this is something nice. Yeah, you can play queen b6 as well if you want to. It's a great way to go. Queen takes a, white sacrificing usually, but yeah, it's not good. I mean, you can play knight c6, and that queen is hard to trap down. That's just one that happened in one game in which queen to b6 tend to be a very strong variation. So don't you worry about that line. Everything is okay and pretty decent. E takes to the d, e takes to the d, then bishop e3 is met by queen b6 or just c takes d. Otherwise, you go into the Tarrasch. Now, of course, there is the possibility with which you can also play c takes d, and that's how you're going to surprise people even more. Because after c takes d, if they play c takes d, then you do d5. Hasn't got that much that you can do. For instance, if they go with the move e takes to the d, you will be able to very easily take back with e takes to the d. And now we don't have the Tarrasch anymore. We just have a bad French defense for white because he hasn't really achieved anything significant for that position. And after e takes to the d, e takes to the d, next move what you're going to be doing is knight f6. You'll most likely bring over the other knight too. You'll be in a perfect position to play with bishop e7 and bishop f5 or even bishop g4. And in fact, after you get to do these moves, you have strong center command, nice piece deployment, and a way to go to put some extra tension towards the center. I really like that. I really do. The fact is that after continuing with this move, most likely white will have to do a move of knight to c3, knight f6, knight f3, and then there is the move of bishop b4 you can do. Bishop d3 castles. The plan here is that the more white is actually missing the isolated pawn, so that basically he cannot attack against it no more, the more difficult or almost impossible it is for him to cause any serious issues. So the result of this is that you can also play with the move of bishop g4. That is pretty essential. Your bishop is good, the majority of his pieces are quite behind, and I really don't know what you'd be doing. Just think that you have a good game. Bishop to g5 will be met by bishop takes c3. Now, one of the things about that structure is that we'd like to take advantage of the c3 pawn. c3 remains as a little bit of a backward pawn, and if he dares to push it, the main problem is that you could have queen a5, and he's not really getting that much of a fantastic activity, with his pieces. He has issues. The g5 will be attacked. f3 is going to be pinned, and there are problems. Really big problems within this position. So that's all I'd like to mention and talk about in that situation. So going back to the earlier stage, we know with c takes to the d, what white needs to do is to either push it button to e5 or defend it. Now, let's go with the e5 because that definitely leads to the advanced French type of position, which is all quite good for you. If you don't want to play the Tarrasch, this one is going to be even easier for you to handle. Here is how. First, you do knight c3. And then you do knight e7. The move is very smart because you want to put that knight up to ef5. And if white plays bishop to the d3, you can still do it, not worrying about the fact that he can exchange and double your pawns. Why is that? because that doubling of the pawns wouldn't be anyhow terrible for you. The truth of the matter is that your bishop does a good job defending. I know it may sound strange when I say it, but it really doesn't do too bad job. It's defending the d5. It helps you to get your queen right up to b6 so that you can add some extra tension towards d4 and b2 as well. And by the time you are making this kind of activity, in fact, White's just unable to make that many things. Like after short counters, for instance, there could be even a g5 as a move. You know, knight takes e6, f takes e6, h takes g5, h takes g5. The d4 is being, real weak. And I mean, the majority of his pieces just tend to be bad. It's just not great. I really don't know what White will be doing in this case, but he's just behind and with his control. And the more we think about this, the harder it is going to be. So this is a key feature. Don't be worried about him exchanging that knight. This is why white players, most players do move of knight a3, which connects to the idea of bringing that knight to the c2. And that somewhat feels, or happens to feel, a little more consistent. Is that good, though? I wouldn't say that it is bad, but it is nothing too special. Like, for instance, after a move of knight to the c2 that he can manage, what I'll recommend is that you do bishop d7, bishop e2, queen to b6, and you are fairly advanced on the queenside area. You got d4 to be pressured and b2 under the attack. So while you are having all these pieces well lined up and ready, White naturally has the castle, and then you play rook c8. Not there, I mean c8. Now take a look at this. You start building. I mean, you really do start building. You start building, and what you want to do while you're building is to make sure that, the majority of your pieces are perfectly well set in order to make the attack work. It is so good that actually after the move of rook to c8 has happened, you be in an excellent position to get going and play with knight b4 as well as continue on the queenside area very effectively. This is what we really do. White has the chance to go on with g4, but then after you play with knight f to e7, you have it all going in this position. It's like, I don't believe that he's going to do something powerful. Perhaps maybe knight h4, but then you can do knight to the g6, and things look good. What about that? After knight g6, well, he's able to do a move like knight to the g6, knight takes g6, and it's an interesting activity. What about White? I mean, can he make any active or dangerous counterplay out there? I don't think so. Even though you can play it this way, then in fact after the exchange, retakes, then you can play with bishop to the e7 and have a nice control out there, and this is quite perfect. And so this is quite valuable at that point. And let's take a look and see what turns out. Okay, going back. So what turns out is that there was the move of d5. So I mean, like d5 edicts to the d. Now, what about if White doesn't do it this way? What about if he actually chooses to continue with a move like knight to c3? Now, this is interesting. What you're supposed to do is that you're supposed to create an actual weakness in this position. So the first thing is you want to play d takes c4. After d takes d, he'd have to most likely go on with the move of knight takes d4. And then you can concentrate on just bringing up your pieces instantly within a few moves. Like, for instance, there is the excellent knight d7, or even bishop b4 check works great. Knight c3, and then you can do knight f6. The great news here is that you just have that easy to follow and straight up development. So in case of the move of bishop to the d3 that is going to take place in this position, you'd be ready to go on for maybe knight d5. Bishop d2, knight c6. As you can see, White still has that actual weakness in d4, and the only compensation he's supposed to get for it is the activity of his pieces. Unfortunately, that activity just doesn't seem too strong, and we are able to add some extra pressure out there on the d4. And okay, so for example, after continuing with the move of knight to c6, then White plays with the move of knight to e2. And in fact, after knight e2, White has the castle short side, no, black castle short side, white castle short side, and then there is the move of bishop d7. This is interesting. So what is the whole point of playing the move of bishop e7? Now you want to regroup. Regrouping means that you just get the chance of coordinating your forces so that they could get close to the king side. And once you get to coordinate them in this way, and you get closer to the king side, you will be maintaining this very efficient pressure against e4. d4 is everything. That pawn of white that you'll be going against, and you would like to give your best in order to set every single attacker on the line against it. Now, what's critical is that since white's passive, obviously, and he's got to go with a move like knight e4, let's say, then you'll be able to push through and go with e5. After d takes d5, there is knight takes c5. And that opening of the position is definitely quite favorable for the simple reason that after the position opens in this way, he has no good development. It's kind of funny, but that is the truth. He doesn't have any real good and consistent development to oppose or confront on our pieces. So you can just say it for yourself. After knight takes d5, that bishop has to move. Probably moves back there, but then you can do queen b6. You can attack him on the b2. His whole position feels a lot weaker. And then the next move we'd like to do is definitely going to be rook to d8. So don't worry, this structure is good. So overall speaking, I'd like to say that this is, in my opinion, one of the safest structures. Now, if you want to play, you can go on with the d5 formation. That's all right. d5 is the main line, and d5 requires very big knowledge. So you can have a strong line and feel good about it. It's not easy. I mean, I've got to tell you that playing d5 doesn't just require you to have a good knowledge. It's also getting you into a position that your opponent knows better. Simply because this is probably what whoever plays the Alapin, and on such a regular basis, it's maybe he's doing that all the time. So when you choose to go into the Alapin, you should know that he'll most likely feel much better prepared than you are at any point. And you just need to be prepared for even for some bad things that can happen. So after d5, white would most likely go on for a continuation like e takes to the d. And then after e takes to the d, you can continue with queen takes d5, d4, and now I'll recommend you do the move of e6. Now, this is kind of interesting because people usually don't expect that move. This move is known as unpopular as it blocks the knight square bishop and kind of takes it out of the game this way. The important thing, the real good news here is that after you play with the move of pawn e6, you may be taking out your knight square bishop for a while, but you open this easy way to complete your development quite effectively. And even if it doesn't go in the conventional way, it is still a nice and good looking development. Here is how. After e6, white's most likely continuation is going to be here with knight f3. And obviously he needs to bring out the knight and castle. Then you play knight f6. Then you play knight f3. Then you do queen d8. In this moment, if white plays something like queen b3 or whatever, you just play knight, you can go on with c takes d4, knight takes d4, or just knight c6. I mean, like there's a game like this: knight c6, bishop e3, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and well, just chase that queen away if you like with knight a5. It's not going to be any problem for you to play with bishop d7 next move. I mean, really, that kind of variation doesn't seem to be giving him anything. You'll only experience problems with that knight, which you can take next moves. So, essentially, white would like to try and play knight c2, which looks more logical. But now the good news is that you can have this very decent development without having to worry about any pressure or problems. Your bishop is a little bad, but the truth is that you just get a very good game. If he chooses to exchange like this, I don't think that you'd have any problems really with your development in your game. Your work is okay. It's lined up over the D line. He can't easily occupy this or do anything else he wants. And by the time he's trying to figure out exactly what to do, I feel like you already play for e5 and get ready to play for bishop f5 if you want, or even bishop g4. So you're good to go. Well, white isn't so good. In fact, in this position, he's got plenty of difficulties to worry about. So this is the thing. It's definitely a pretty decent kind of development and control, plus the possibility for this easy way of just getting the right formation. Certainly not that many things for you to be concerned about. It's a good game. That's all about that. So try this line out. I feel like you actually be quite successful with it. Again, was just a bit limited. And should you have any questions or anything else that you may not be so clear about on how to play that variation, please let me know. And as always, I'll be very happy to help.